So that listening, that honoring, that culture of caring and kindness that's sincere, that establishes that natural desire for kids to want to learn. Naturally, we are curious people.
Not surprising on this podcast is leadership, and what a beautiful demonstration of leadership that is not only, I guess, appropriate, but relevant and useful and practical, and just the opportunity to support and nurture and help these kids succeed.
For an organization that's educational, that we're providing that, we have to have it ourselves as a staff. So those are the same tips we're bringing into the classroom. We're saying, how do we bring it inside of our organization as well? How do I bring it inside of my way of being?
Welcome to the Spirituality in Leadership podcast. I'm Andrew Cohn. Spirituality in Leadership is a platform for conversations with leaders at all levels about bringing our spiritual dimensions to our leadership, our teams, our workplaces, and all areas of our lives in order to achieve greater success and fulfillment and build and sustain healthier organizations. If you'd like to connect with me to talk further about these topics and or about individual or team coaching, leadership workshops, or team alignment, please go to my website, lighthouseteams.com. Enjoy the podcast. In this episode of the podcast, I speak with Stu Semigran. I'm so happy to have Stu on the podcast. He is the co-founder of the EduCare Foundation, which has been around for over 30 years, providing support to students and teachers in public schools. It began in Southern California, and it has extended to other regions, supporting about 500,000 students so far in its tenure. Stu talks about the foundation of EduCare. He talks about his book called Heartset Education, and also reviews the 8 Heartset skills that are really about bringing love into education in very practical, specific, measurable, results-driven, and fulfilling ways. Frankly, speaking with him about his work, it's inspiring to me. It makes me think about how can I bring some of this into my work in the corporate sphere? How can I support what he's doing in my community? And just continue to be inspired by the stories he tells and the practical, person-centered, supportive, loving way that education is improved through EduCare's work. I suspect you'll find it inspiring as well. Welcome back to the Spirituality in Leadership podcast, and I am really, really happy to have with me today a man who I've known tangentially, admired for decades, and finally having a conversation in depth about the work that you do and have done, and that is Stu Semigran, co-founder of the EduCare Foundation. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're with me from that beautiful forest in the Northwest.
Wow. Glad to be here, Andrew. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. And so, this conversation might be a little bit different than many we've had on the podcast, which tend to be very business focused, sometimes healing modalities focused. And you have been, as an understatement, in the education space, as you might define that, for a very long time. I'd love to hear a bit about your story, your work, very broadly, as you choose to discuss, and also what connects you with this topic of spirituality and leadership.
Well, good. It's interesting to bring up the business connection. A funny story is I grew up in New York. My father was a manufacturer, a garment industry, and he always says, "You're going to take over the Semigran lingerie company with your brother." And I said, "I don't think so." But that whole kind of thought of business in terms of giving and providing. So once I became a teacher, we connected against, well, you're in a business just called the business of education. And I realized an EduCare Foundation that Candy Semigran, my wife, and I founded, was all about how do we bring what we discovered as teachers in the classroom, how do we bring what we thought wasn't quite there yet in public education into the system of education? And how do we bring, in terms of kids being aware of who they are and what their life could become? So it wasn't just about, do I get a job? Do I graduate? Do I get on the team? Who's my next girlfriend, boyfriend? I was like, what's meaningful for you that you can discover inside of your education that will carry purpose and motivation into your life? So that was the roots of where EduCare started back 35 years ago. I was teaching, and I went up to my principal back then. I said, I've been learning a lot about self-awareness, and I've been learning and taking classes in terms of goal setting and social skills and self-esteem building. And our kids are lacking this. Can I teach a class? And he said, you're assigned to teach math and get those test scores up. So the answer would be no. Well, I, interesting enough, was able to end around him legally and started teaching an elective where kids started to build skills of self-awareness, social skills, goal setting skills, time management skills. And all of a sudden their test scores were going up. And he came back to me about 6 months later and says, the scores are going up. Whatever you're doing, don't tell me about it, just keep doing it. And that was kind of the desire to go, our kids need much more than what public education is providing them. And that was the impetus to leave the classroom. And my wife was teaching early on in her career, kindergarten. And we both said, can we reach more kids and providing them what we thought was so necessary for them to have fulfilling and rich lives? And that was the beginning of EduCare, incorporated in 1990. And since then, with a lot of twists and turns, we've served over 450,000 kids in many cities around the country, globally, in some areas as well. And it's been just a joy to be at the head of that.
Beautiful. 450,000 kids that you've touched because you wouldn't take no for an answer from your principal.
Correct.
Even this, so thank you for your persistence. Even what's interesting is how you're pointing out, like, the kids now have more fulfilling lives and their test scores are up, right?
Yeah. And we saw that. I mean, I saw that in the classroom as a teacher. I said, they need to have a reason to learn. They need to have their creativity spark from within them. EduCare, which when we picked that name years ago, it's from the Latin root educare, to bring forward what's within them, what's within any of us. It's there. And if a kid's interested in the arts, if a kid's interested in science, rather than they have to have a prescribed set of, you have to learn this formula. And a lot of kids didn't want to take that path. So we said, how do we kindle the interest, the curiosity, the creativity, the desire from within them to match what might be what their life holds for them? And that's where we kind of took it from there. I would see kids, they didn't care about math, but they were just tremendous speakers. And there they were out in front, leading the voice of kids in terms of social justice and other things. So it's like catching the kids where they're at and then bringing out front.
And when you began working with kids, I presume were they the kids in your classroom or certainly in your school?
Yeah. Well, I had an interest always to work with kids who are underserved, kids in the poorest of neighborhoods of Los Angeles and elsewhere. And there's one funny story about that. As EduCare was starting, I was asked to come out to Philadelphia School District and introduce it into their school district if possible. And so we started working with a group of kids that no one would know were the lowest achieving kids in the incoming 9th grade. And at the end of the year, their test scores came up and the principal said, you can tell others who you're working with. And the reason we held back on telling the teachers who these kids were was because we wanted them to be seen and cared for and considered as high achieving kids. And the teachers came back and they go, why did you pick those highest achieving kids to take your program? And I said, it wasn't that, it was the opposite. But you treated them, you saw them in the best. And that's, in some ways, they rose to that occasion along with the work we did with them. So a lot of our work is how do we see and treat people in the highest of regard rather than in our limitations of how we already categorize them. And that's the same with kids. And how kids can do that for themselves and one another.
I've heard that called the Pygmalion effect, right? Just how we envision what do we think someone's capable of and how when teachers perceive certain children as more capable, less capable, their teaching is impacted by that point of view. Is that right?
Yeah. And that's one of the first, we have a set of skill sets in the work we do. We call them Heartset skills. And the first skill set is how do we learn to honor people, to see the best in them, to not judge them. And a lot of that work is for kids is they have to start seeing the best in themselves. And if others don't see that, they probably won't catch on that. So a lot of times we say, can you catch the best of yourselves, even if others don't? And sometimes we have to be the ones to see that when the kids don't see it in themselves. So that way of really reflecting and catching yourself at your best, and then looking at what you need to improve upon at the same time.
Mm. Where do you start with kids who just don't see that? They
Yeah,
don't have the
yeah,
encouragement. It's just not present. How
yeah,
do you, nourish a seed if there doesn't seem to be a seed?
yeah.
Of course, it is there, right? I suppose that's the answer to my question, but how do you do
Yeah.
that?
It's a great question, and it takes me back to when my first year I was kind of a rebel, radical young teacher coming into public school, and I would see teachers sitting behind their desk handing out worksheets to the kids, and then they would go back, pick up their newspaper as a teacher, and the kids would have to. And I go, there's no accident that these kids are not interested in learning. So in order to have the kids have that interest, part of it was how do I create a classroom where we have interest in each other, when we really truly care about each other, and it's not just to get through, and where we can set a standard of excellence because we care, not because that's expected of you. And so part of the work that I would do in my classroom when we do our programs in schools is we call it a culture of caring, a culture of kindness. How do we establish that? And it's simple things, looking at kids, saying their names, welcoming them, enjoying one another, celebrating each other's success, and finding ways to bring out the best. And it's not an overnight thing. But as that culture and that environment starts to build in a classroom, in a school, in a family, uh, then they can catch on to, um, there's something of me I want to bring out more. And these people sincerely care about me. It's been said, kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So when the caring and the kindness gets established, and the authenticity of the teacher, the honesty, the sincere interest, a parent, a teacher, then there's more room. I remember having a parent come up to me at one of our parent workshops. Son is about 17. She goes, my son doesn't talk to me anymore. And part of that was taking her back into how she could establish an environment in her home where he would want to talk to her, where she would want to listen to him, not just tell him or advise him. So that listening, that honoring, that culture of caring and kindness that's sincere, that establishes that natural desire for kids to want to learn. Naturally, we are curious people.
Hmm. Well, and the word that comes up for me around that, not surprising on this podcast, is leadership, and what a beautiful demonstration of leadership that is. That is not only, I guess, appropriate, but relevant and useful and practical, and just the opportunity to support and nurture and help these kids succeed.
Yeah. And I see the same thing in being at the head of EduCare for many years, that because for that to happen in a classroom, for an organization that's educational, that we're providing that, we have to have it ourselves as a staff. And how do I demonstrate that? And how do I bring that into my organization? Out of authentic caring for people, out of truly listening, asking for feedback, taking their feedback in terms of change and, of course, correction, celebrating together, catching the best of ourselves. So those are the same tips we're bringing into the classroom. We're saying, how do we bring it inside of our organization as well? How do I bring it inside of my way of being?
Right. Beautiful. Right. So you're talking about leadership within your organization and also how your organization models leadership, or invites teachers to lead in their own organizations, if you will, in their fiefdoms, in their classrooms.
Exactly. And one of the best compliments, Andrew, I ever received when I visited one of our schools, the principal came up to me and said, since your people are here working with our kids and our teachers, we're happier school. I don't quite know how to put the words on it. It's not just what you're doing. It's your people show up and there's something about them that lifts us and makes it a happier place. And I go, to me, that spoke to more than just what I do, but who I am, what our staff does, who our staff are, who our teachers are. We'll do a lot of work with curriculum and teaching, great new ideas for teaching. And teachers want to get hold of a book that we published on that. And I said, before we touch the book, let's really reflect on how we can really transform ourselves to really exemplify the principles and activities we're going to put out in your curriculum. So there's that shifting from beingness to doingness that we think is at the core of our work.
Or shifting from doingness to beingness, you mean?
Right.
Right.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, and right, and it's interesting how it is book focused. It's interesting. I've had people on the podcast talk about even religion itself as being so book focused, and how that's fine for some. It could take you to a certain place, whatever, and what else is available. My first career when I was in LA in the '90s was in the law. Talk about book focused,
Right.
and then how do you bring more of yourself to that, and how do you? There's no being in the law, but don't get me started. There's a reason I don't want to be reductive, but yeah. But let me ask you there's a word that comes up a lot in this podcast, of course, called spirituality, which I
Yeah.
generally don't define because it's so broad and means so many different things to different people. But I'm curious to know for you, what is, if anything, and I believe there is for you, spiritual about this work that you're doing, and what are the spiritual dimensions or principles that you're bringing forward? And this is all, it may be very subjective to you, it may be very broad and general, but to walk me through your framework and how it impacts and informs the work that you do.
Yeah. Well, two things come to mind as I'm listening to your question. One takes me back to where I don't share this very often, but I feel I like to share it today. I was a little boy in my bed, waking up in the morning, maybe 5, 6 years old. And I would feel a lot about what was going on in the world around me, my family, and chaos and trauma and things. And I always had a prayer that I would speak. And my prayer was to God, as I knew God. And I said, whatever I can do so we can have less fighting, less yelling, less hurt. Um, I just want it to be better for people, for myself. And so that kind of somehow it kind of set a pathway into my life. And um, without using the word at that time, love, it was how do I carry love forward for me and for those I love and those I care about. EduCare, one of EduCare's taglines is love is the foundation for education.
Hmm.
That unless kids know and we create environments of love, learning won't be at its highest and kids won't be supported in the best of ways. So when I look at spirituality, um, and I have my own practice, my own beliefs with it. In fact, I've been called out sometimes in the educational world. Um, I don't know what you do spiritually, but whatever you do, would you please say something to these people here in the room? Because what you carry of a message and the way you carry it could help us. Someone passed away, whether it's a crisis in a school. So I look at spirituality being very personal, but at the essence, to me, it's if I had to put it into words, how do we carry love into an organization, into our practice, into our relationships? And it can be very quiet. It can be very unknown, uh, but it's an energy that I think pervades. People ask me, how is it that EduCare's continued? So many nonprofits fall out. And here it was just the two of us, my wife and me starting. And now there's a staff of about 500. And many of them were kids of ours, kids being our students, 10, 15 years. And I said, whatever that was, that we were guided, that we listened carefully to, our voice, our wisdom, that we trusted. To me, that all played a part in wanting to have more love inside of kids' world and their life and their schools. So maybe a roundabout, but that's how I kind of looked at it.
Mm. No, that's beautiful. And I've spoken with other people on the podcast about love and what that means and how it can, do we use the word? Do we not use the word? What does it
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
I think the important thing is, again, as I've said before, if there's a God, I don't think she cares what language we use. It's much more
that's right.
important what we're doing and what we're carrying. But and just it's interesting, there's sometimes when I speak with people about their experience, their experience could be very different than mine. For example, whether they're a horse trainer or an engineer or a
Right.
field medic in Australia or whatever. And I've had those people on the podcast. I have been a student uh, in many forms and many iterations. And I have seen the difference between teachers who will meet you as a human being with some level of
Yeah.
caring and for whom it's a transaction.
Yeah. And, that word love that you speak of, that I mentioned, um, it was pretty far out for me to even mention it at conferences. And in fact, about 10, 15 years ago, I was doing a seminar at a conference. And it just came upon me. And I said, let's everybody just say the word love out loud together for about 60 seconds and see what happens. And I thought, well, they're going to show me the door very quick. And the last time I'm going to be speaking at a conference, but something wanted to take that word out. And we started, and as we did, a lot of laughter and quietness, whatever it was, but we started to speak about love as something apart from how we can categorize it, intimacy, sexuality, physicalness, where it's just a really warm regard for people, whoever you're with. And I would do an activity called I See You as an icebreaker, where here we are, 50, 100 strangers, and we would just walk around and pause to look at each other. And the only words you could say would be, Stu or Andrew, I see you. And the request was just look and see who you're with and let them see you. And it kind of opened the door for another definition or understanding of what love could be, as Carl Rogers had written, about positive regard, really seeing people without knowing their history, without categorizing them. And that's the way we look at how kids could be seen. And when a kid is seen that way, and they know it after a while, they'll know they're being valued and seen and heard. Learning is very close at hand.
Hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Right. I'm seeing this person, this child at whatever age, as someone valuable, someone whom I'm extending love toward. I'm not seeing them as a poor performer. I'm not ranking them. I'm not judging them. Is another thing that can get in the way. Yeah. Interesting. I'm prompted to think about how I can use an exercise like that with business groups or board retreats or things like that I do. It's interesting, and maybe some modification, but only slight.
Well, we prime the pump with it a little bit, so otherwise it'd throw everybody way out of the water. But we there's a video clip I use, and it's public shared, it's not mine, of a school and everyone's dealing with someone, but no one ever stops to consider that everyone is dealing with someone. And you hear the stories of the kids, the teachers, and all of a sudden you realize you're in a world that you're just walking by rather than understanding that everyone's got something. And when there's many funny stories of my kids. And as I learned who they were, just one story, I used to, as a young kid, I worked at a camp for disabled kids, physically and disabled kids, on Fresh Air Fund, New York City, outside of the city. And they put the poorest of kids in with the most disabled kids, and they grouped them together, and it was quite something. And the first day as a counselor, one of my kids, his name was Eddie, comes up to me, and he had cerebral palsy. Everybody made fun of him. He limped around, and he would joke about his own disability. And he said, can I get you to teach me how to tie my sneaker laces? I said, yeah. So every time at rest period after lunch, 20 minutes was Eddie and me sitting together, and I was, bow, you put it through here. And after a few weeks, he learned it. And I got it back to the city. His mom calls me, can you come over to our apartment? They lived in a high, low rent area. And I came up, a college student, free dinner. Great, I'll go. And she said, how was summer with Eddie? And I said, great. Did you know he came back? We're sitting across the table eating spaghetti and meatballs. And did you notice that Eddie has a new skill? He can tie his shoes. And she looks at me and she goes, what? And he starts laughing. And I go, he came to camp, learn. He knew how to tie his shoes. I said, no. 20 minutes, 2 weeks, I got him to tie it. She goes, you didn't catch it, but this Teddy doesn't have a father. He was smart enough to know he can get 20 minutes with you to teach him by you and him alone. And it changed my whole look on, I didn't know him, but I loved him. And he wanted that more than anything else. So it took me into teaching, actually, that one experience as an 18, 19-year-old camp counselor, going, gosh, I saw someone's need. I didn't know who they were. And that was the greatest thing for him. So to me, that's where life takes on new meaning, when we can really see a stranger or anyone as someone so valuable in front of us.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful story. And I also acknowledge this is a kid who asked. Good for him.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of kids, a lot of us, me included, asking is one of the hardest things to do. And that's one of the things we teach kids. We talk about being vulnerable, being strong. They really can work together, and we all are interdependent. So let's find out. And I would sometimes come in on a bad day in my classroom when I was teaching middle school, and I tell my kids, bad day here, back off. I need some space. Don't come at me hard today because I'm not in a good mood. And the kids understood that. And as a parent, I had to learn that too, that I don't have to be super dad every day of the year, and family will support me if I let them know what's going on.
Yeah, beautiful. And in a position of leadership to be able to acknowledge, hey, I'm not having a great day. It's like, it's okay. I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to be perfect. And to me, that gives permission, right, to the others who are following to stop, first of all, treating you like you're perfect, but secondly, holding themselves to some standard that I could never share if I'm not totally at the top of my game.
Exactly. And I think, and I come back into my role as, president and CEO of EduCare for many years. That was a tough one for me because I wanted to be at the pinnacle of, I got it. So let's all rise to the occasion and go, wait a minute, I don't have it. I need support. I need someone brighter than me, more experienced than me at this part of our organization. And I think, I'm looking back going, that was one of, my blessings that I was able to bring about people who had those qualities that exceeded where I could take it. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Right. And to me, it's a demonstration that education it's continuous. There is no end. There's always something that we're learning to make ourselves better, perhaps at both the being and the doing levels.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it also gives people a privilege to be the teacher. I'm just thinking some of my staff at EduCare, I would just look to them going, I have no clue how to get this done. Come on. And they would take it much further than I can even think about it. And letting go, that was, I'm now referring back into more of my executive role at the nonprofit versus my classroom experience, and letting go and placing people in positions of authority and having the trust in them is, I think, part of that same idea of seeing the best in someone and then letting them go with it. And that's always a challenge. Just still is for me. I like to be the fixer, the problem solver, the master controller. So I work on that to this day.
Yeah, well, I think we all do, and that, as I often say to my clients, that part of you who likes to be the fixer and jumping in, whatever, that's gotten you to where you are, right?
Exactly.
You don't want to lose that part, but maybe you just need to negotiate with it a little bit, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, because something has come up in this podcast a number of times where people will be talking about some dimensions of spirituality and leadership, however people may understand that, and particularly in worlds where, including in education, where results are expected. Education is one of those places. And so how do you hold in this space? I mean, how do you hold in love in education, which I hear as a theme, and have some degree of accountability, giving people a tough message, giving feedback? How does one do that? Because your environment's a bit different than the corporate world that I'm typically in, and yet there's times when you need to give tough feedback. To me, that's not inconsistent with being loving and supportive, right?
Exactly.
But maybe I want to shut up and hear you talk about that. But let's talk about that intersection.
Yeah. Well, first, I want to address it in terms of results. And it had a lot to do with how does EduCare be sustained. And we know we needed funding from a lot of different sources. And we know funding came with results. And so early on, we said, I knew it worked from my experience in the classroom. I could see it. Intuitively, I knew it worked. When you provide that type of environment for kids, they're going to shine, they're going to thrive. But that wouldn't be enough just to say that to some funder. So we went quickly into research and evaluation as an organization. And we had universities doing research on our work, and everything from test scores to family relationships to college entrance to less referrals, truancies, attendance, all of that. And we had some very powerful studies saying, and one study, I think it was done out of UCLA, that students who attended EduCare for 4 years in high school had a 23% graduation rate bump. And these are in low performing schools. And when people saw that data and the research behind it, it opened up eyes. So I said, we have to provide, this isn't just feel good, look good. This is really helping kids in very practical ways. There's many stories I can tell on that level. Then in terms of how do we bring it in terms of providing feedback and keeping people on course, a lot of it has to do with those honest conversations, those tough, honest conversations. And to know that feedback is not against us, it's not against, and how do we build that culture of trust? Knowing that I'm on your side. And it was rough because a lot of people looked at feedback or accountability as something, oh, I'm going to be caught and watched over and all of a sudden kicked out the door. So we had to become a learning organization rather than I got you organization. We have to, and a lot of it has to do with excellence and coming to our theme of we care this much about our kids that we want to be the best we can. And as we care for our kids, we care for each other. And one of our mission, parts of our mission statement, or actually our purpose statement of EduCare, our last line on that is take great care of our people. And that meant we're going to be honest with each other. We're going to give each other feedback, and we're going to celebrate together. And a lot of the feedback had also to do is to get positive feedback. A lot of people realize, it's expected to do this, but we don't celebrate when you actually have that win, that success.
Beautiful. Yeah, I could see how there can be an expectation. Well, I shouldn't say that. I know for me, I have an association that teachers provide corrective feedback, right? But what about the encouraging feedback and the positive feedback? And it's interesting. I remember, wow, it's so interesting. Thank you for triggering this memory for me. 8th grade social studies. I had a teacher who gave me this copious comments in red ink on a written paper that he did. And he was so encouraging to me. And the fact that I'm remembering this more than a few years later, he said, "You are a rara avis, Andrew." And I'm like, well, I don't even know what that meant. And but it would seem like the fact that he would say something like that, it's almost like he took delight in providing that positive feedback as opposed to saying good job or something. And it's so interesting how I haven't thought about that in a very, very long time, but the power of encouragement that way. So powerful.
Yeah. And encouragement could be very honest. There were one of our schools we've worked with in LA, parents flocked to come to this school, which is rare, to come for evenings and family nights. And I wanted to find out what was at this school and what it was. And I'm very close to the principal who's now moved on to other things. Actually, he was a guest on a podcast of mine just a few weeks ago. And what he did is he realized that parents were his partners, because parents usually would get a phone call from the school and they would already be on the defense going, no, my kid isn't that bad. And they would get phone calls from the school with good news, which no one would ever call a parent with good news. They would always call, it's time for you to come in. I got to talk to you about your son or your daughter. And so when parents would come in, they almost disarmed them with kindness, but they also had some feedback at times as well. But it wasn't like, I want to just blast you and your kid. I want to let you know your kid was way out of line and you see the potential, what your son and daughter is really about. And we're with them every day and we're with you to make the best of their lives. And when the parents knew that the school was on their side as a partner, things changed.
Mm-hmm.
And that came from a culture of kindness, not of a culture, I got you, and I got your son, and I'm going to tell you why he's got to fix it. A whole different way of feedback and relationship building.
Beautiful. Could you touch on the other Heartset skills? And by the way, my understanding is that the Heartset skills are discussed in the Heartset education book, which we can put a link to that book in the show notes here.
Sure.
So whether you choose to plug the book or just talk about the skills, I'd love to hear more about the principles.
Yeah. Well, a book was published, Heartset Education, A Way of Living and Learning, published out 2023. And it was a way to capture all of what we've been learning with EduCare and in a way that we can find it to more people. And in it, there's stories, there's activities, and there's 8 Heartset skills that are discussed with, with a lot of examples of how to put it into play, business, school, family, and such. And the first one, and we talked about it today, is honoring. And the second one is praising, encouraging, and they go hand in hand. And we talk a lot about how do you incorporate that for yourself prior to even doing it for someone else. That unless you're experiencing your own honor, your own praise, encouragement, and that's not a common thing to do. I used to come home from teaching over the course of 6 or 7 classes, 150 kids, and I would be dishonoring myself once I walked through the door. Man, you screwed up with that kid. And wait a minute, pull back. How many kids did you really, really connect with today? And there's a few kids you blew out or whatever that was. But kind of look at that deeper part of encouragement and honoring. And then the third skill has to do with listening. We call it listening from the heart. Not listening to change, to win over, to make a better point, but listening because you truly want to learn and understand and care. And there's activities, we call them heart talks. Kids do them in classrooms, parents do them with kids. How do you listen with topics or in ways that you want to understand? Build empathy. And then we move on from that, and we call it the power of choice, that you always have your attitude choice, no matter what's showing up in life. And how often do we want to blame and victimize and point fingers rather than go, wait a minute, what's my part? How do I create my choices, not just look at it, who do I point my finger at? Then we take some deeper levels. We move into a theme of forgiveness. How do we move from judgment to forgiveness? And we have our kids doing fun activities. We want you to walk around the school quietly, and you're almost like a detective. And listen to all the judgments you're hearing expressed. This is the roots of bullying. And I want you to start hearing what you're hearing. And then reflect on what are the judgments privately you hold against yourself. So we start to have them look at the power of forgiving, not just others, but yourself on your own self-judgments. And I've had a lot of my students.
I'm sorry, just want to interrupt you 1 second.
Yeah.
Because I love the word forgiveness. It's such a powerful word, and it's not something that is discussed too often. How do you define that at the simplest level for kids and in classrooms?
Yeah. Let me start with a story.
Right.
Just that we would talk about this or work with this with kids, and we'd have kids being real honest. We go, you don't know what my father did to me over the years, or my sister, and you want me to forgive this, SUV, anything. And we start pulling back and go, what we're talking about, what he did, was that right? No. Was that harmful? Likely so. But who's going to carry around that hurt and anger and hatred? It'll be your carry, not his. He may have gone, who knows what he's up to. And for you to give yourself the benefit of letting it go, not that what he did is right, this is where forgiveness plays a role. Who knows what he did for whatever reason, what his life was like as a child too. You don't know that, I don't know. But you don't need to carry that hatred in your heart, because that's going to be a poison to yourself. But he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't, but you deserve it for you. That's your gift to yourself. And it doesn't make it any righter or wronger for what he did. So that's your gift to yourself. And we say the same about how you forgive yourself for all those tape loops of judgments that might be running for anything you might have done. That's your gift. So it takes a while. We do activities where they speak of it, where they write of it, where they practice it, and parents, and it's kind of out of the norm. But when kids can catch this, they know it's a lighter heart that they carry, and that's what we want for them.
Beautiful. And so it sounds as though each of these Heartset skills are building one upon the other.
That's right.
And so what happens after forgiveness?
Yeah. So then we have the last 4, actually 3. We have resolving conflict. And people always look at that, how do I resolve fights, and go, well, guess what? Where's the conflict probably originating from? It's your conflict inside of yourself. If these are mirroring your way. So, what do you notice that you're judging and hard on yourself, and how do you shift on that? And we work with something called the 4 tudes. You can shift your altitude. You can shift your attitude. You can be more in gratitude, And sometimes you just need more fortitude. And we kind of look at how do you take any challenge through the lens of altitude, attitude, gratitude, and fortitude. And sometimes, they go, whoa, guess what? I have more power inside of me than I thought, and shifting. And then the last two we work with is use all of your challenges as opportunities to learn, and then giving and receiving, which translate into service, which takes us right back into honoring and praising. That when you really have a fullness of yourself, you're naturally inclined to want to serve yourself and others. And that takes us back into honoring and praising and listening and all that. So it's kind of a looping cycle of depth of self-development. And in public schools, I mean, we don't go at it this way. It's very fun and pieces put together. But these skill sets get ingrained in our kids and in our teachers. And that's what I saw from one classroom going, how do we systematize that? And with the book, be part of that way to bring it into teaching programs at colleges, bringing it into internships with new teachers. And that's part of our aspiration.
Beautiful. Just beautiful. I'm just wondering if there may be another story that you may want to tell, perhaps that went into how some of the Heartset skills were formed or sequenced or traction or resistance. My sense is that you're just a font of good stories with respect to just human nature and the learning curve and how people can receive and grow. Anything just come to mind in terms of a story?
Well, what comes to mind has to do with me. Like these skills, I'm with myself all the time with them. So, and we all know we usually teach what we most need to learn. So I'm looking at gentleness right now in my life and pausing more in my life. I'm a fast track getting everything done, building programs, and I'm at a stage in my life at my age, and as I've stepped back from being CEO of EduCare, I'm going, there's a more opportunity now to reflect and pause and get off the doing cycle. Not that I won't be doing, but to source it from a place of what's now present for me. And I have to realize that service is part of my blood, my fabric. But that doesn't mean I have to run out the door every day and change the world. Some of it is, Stu, you have to go to a chiropractor. Your back's been out for too long. Take your time to do that. So I think a lot of it is just taking it into the present moment and just using those skills as life skills. And then I get the thrill of hearing from kids of mine who share with me where they are in their lives. And that's a great joy. To know that about 20% of EduCare's staff, now close to 500, were our students 10, 15 years ago. And now they're back in their communities as engineers, as recreational leaders, on staff with EduCare, helping the next generation in their hometown, their home part of the city. I go, not much better than that to know kids are giving back. And that level of service, I think a lot of people look at our youth, and it's a tough time for kids with mental health issues and all the hardships that are going on in the world around them right now, immigration and all that's impacted them, that they are standing into service in great ways. We had the last many years, 5, 6 years, taking groups of students from our high schools up to Sacramento in California to speak to congressional leaders about the need for funding for education. They didn't want to hear from people like me. And these kids would speak from their heart about what their schools needed. Their parents would come with them. And that gives me a lot of hope, a lot of optimism and excitement that our kids are really stepping into their leadership, because we call it compassionate and courageous leaders. You can carry both. You could be a strong, brave leader, and you can do it out of the goodness of your heart. And I really believe people don't see that in our youth. They just think they're off getting big jobs, or they're just getting in trouble, or they're in gangs. There's a lot of kids leading the way into service leadership today. And I just want people to know that. I see it. It's very inspiring.
And where do you find that? Where would you look to see that? I'm just wondering.
Yeah. Well, our website, we tell our stories, educarefoundation.com. There's an organization, there's many organizations. If you go to university website, UCLA has a center for the science of forget the name, but the science of kindness, good health. UCLA, Harvard, many of the universities are now teaching, not necessarily our curriculum, but the idea of building service leadership and compassionate leaders in young people. So I would probably go on the sites and just check that out.
Yeah. Is it something called the Badari Kindness Institute at UCLA? Is that something
There's that at UCLA. Berkeley has one, Good Science. I was actually speaking of Berkeley, but that is one at UCLA as well. After School Alliance out of Washington, D.C., they're the kind of the conduit and leader for after school programs across the country. And a lot of it has to do with service leadership. How do kids step into service leadership? The After School Alliance. But EduCare Foundation, we're telling our stories left and right.
Great. So that's EduCare
Foundation.com.
Foundation.com. Got it. Well,
Right.
I want to put some links in the show notes so people can look for more. If people want to connect with you, do they want to go through the EduCare website? Is that the best way?
Well, right now, probably contact me directly. They could get them through EduCare, but since I'm not day-to-day active, they can just contact me at Stu Semigran at gmail.com.
Or do you want to be left alone for a little bit as you back off? I want to be careful what you put out there.
No, I'm active. I love to be active, but so I'm open to people who are really interested in carrying that message that we've been talking about today.
Beautiful. No, I get it. You're not going anywhere. Things will shift. The pieces of the puzzle will shift, but your energy is still going to be out there, is my sense, because this is who you are.
Yeah. And it's not just me. I think what I see around me, Andrew, there's something growing, I think, of people caring. So that love word isn't, whatever we call it, isn't so foreign anymore. I was very close friends with the leader for after-school programs who led California for many years, still does. And he would wear a hat inside of his speeches around the state with love as his word. And he would talk about leading with love. And we were talking with EduCare about love as a foundation for education. And I think more and more people are coming out of the closet that love isn't a foreign word. It's what's carrying us right now. And I think so many are looking to make that more known and more available, because we look at our world and there's a lot that we need right now.
Well, I think this is a beautiful place to land the plane. Thank you, Stu, for your loving energy and attention and focus, your impact, your dedication, inspiration. My head is percolating about how might I get involved, and how, frankly, I'm thinking about, just selfishly, forgive me, about how to turn these Heartset skills into business leadership principles with work teams.
Yeah.
And I work a lot with cross-functional teams and global teams. And these are skills, maybe if we ever do a part 2, it's like, where's the global component to this?
Exactly. I mean, that's really big in my world. We've done work in Israel. We've done work in other nations. Arab and Jewish students together, Arab Jewish teachers together, which was unheard of back when we were bringing it forward. So I always look, and the work of EduCare is now expanding globally as well. Heartset. So I'm all aboard. Just know.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Stu. I really appreciate your time. Looking forward to continuing the conversation. And thank you for all you do, and more importantly, for all you are.
Thank you so much, Andrew. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Spirituality in Leadership. If you want to access this wealth of knowledge and insight on a regular basis, please subscribe to the show. Join the network of leaders who want to do and be better. You can go to the site spiritualityinleadership.com or your preferred podcast platform to catch all the episodes and learn more. Until next time, take good care of yourself.